So the quote you just heard is from an autistic person, where he explained to me what it feels like to be autistic. He told me that it feels like you're constantly behind on everyone and that you're looked at differently. Before I started this research, I didn't know a lot about autism yet, but then someone very close to me got diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. I got to see the impact of daily life events on them from a close view. For example, going to the supermarket, which is a basic thing to you, can already be a big challenge for autistic people. And personally, I really enjoy going to the theater. And when we want to visit the theater together, it always takes a bit more effort because it takes them a lot of energy and it requires recovery time afterwards. So these steps that are logical to you in going to the theater are already a big challenge for autistic people. And that is why I decided to do research on this topic and try to find out how we can improve this experience. But first things first, what is autism spectrum disorder? Shortly said, ASD. Overall, autism is a very big spectrum, which means that it's different for every individual. But overall, it's a lifelong differability that influences how people communicate and interact with the world. Differability? Yes, differability, you heard it correct. It is a word that you may have never heard of before, but it's a combination of the words different and ability. And this means that you are abled, but in a different way than most people. So it's a disadvantage in this society that is not built for autistic people. ASD includes having difficulties in communicating, repeating in repetitive behavior, which can be repeating the same thing over and over again, but also repeating the same thought in your head over and over again. Then small changes can already be very distressing. And then there is sensory overload. You may have heard of this before. It's when the senses become very overwhelming and painful. An umbrella term I will be using a lot is neurodiversity. And neurodiversity includes different groups. It includes autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, high sensitivity, and high intelligence. I myself am also under this umbrella because I'm highly sensitive. But in this research, I mostly focused on autism. And overall, we call those people neurodivergent. And on the other side is neurotypical. And neurotypical people are the people who aren't neurodivergent. Neurotypical people have a filter in their brains, and this filter filters the senses. And neurodivergent people also have this filter, but it functions a lot less, which, for example, makes it hard to focus on a conversation, or it can make the sensory stimuli overwhelming and painful. So that's the sensory overload. For example, I am noise sensitive, so for me sounds come unfiltered. And then if I'm in a room with a lot of people, it's hard to focus on a conversation, and sometimes it's painful, and then I just zone out. But let's go on to the topic and zoom in a bit closer. Participation in leisure is very beneficial for children and youth with autism spectrum disorder. It helps them in developing creativity and skills, forming meaningful relationships, developing their self-esteem, creating meaning in life, self-development, creating emotional well-being, and improving mental and physical ability. So as you can see, this is a big list with a lot of benefits. But still, people with autism spectrum disorder participate a lot less in leisure activities than children and youth without autism spectrum disorder. Why is this? Well, society, including leisure, is just made for the average neurotypical person. There's a lack of structure. Also, therapeutic approaches are mostly not by using leisure, but by trying to fix the individual's behavior instead of looking at their surroundings and trying to adjust the surroundings to them. And this is called the fixer's mentality. And this fixer's mentality can be very harmful because it can make the individual feel like they should change themselves, and because the therapeutic approaches focuses on you should fix yourself instead of just letting them be and looking at the environment that is just not made for them. And this results in masking. And masking is hiding your neurodiversity by pretending to be neurotypical. And this masking takes a lot of energy. And if you combine this masking with a lack of structure in daily life, it can result in an autistic burnout. Well, you probably heard of a burnout before, but an autistic burnout is a little bit different. An autistic burnout is a state of physical and mental exhaustion and heightened stress. Your capacity to manage skills, sensory input, or social interaction is lowered. And this all comes from years of masking and trying to live up to the standards. And this is also the reason a lot of autistic people drop out of school, because the system is just not made for them. So as you can see, this is a global issue, but let's look a bit closer. Let's look at the theater. I researched different challenges autistic people face when going to the theater, and this is one result in specific I want to show you. So I asked people, what is the average grade that you gave the theater experience? And the average grade people gave it was an 8. You see the big peak? And that's the average. So if you ask me, that's a pretty high number. But if we look at the responses from autistic people only, the average grade was only a 5.8. So I think this is a big difference, and it's enough reason that we have to create change. So I talked to about 25 autistic people about challenges they face and their experiences. So the challenges they face are that there is a lack of information. The theater is a very crowded space, and this results in getting tired or even exhausted. And afterwards, it requires recovery time. And for recovery time, you don't have to think about maybe a few hours getting a good night rest, but it can take a few days to recover from this activity. So when autistic people want to visit the theater, they also have to take into account that the days after they have to rest. So what can we do to help? So getting information beforehand. For example, about parking, the order of actions. So do you first scan your ticket, or do you first go to the cloakroom to hang up your jacket? An overview of who, what, where, and when is going to happen when you arrive at the theater. Knowing the layout of the theater by a map or pictures or videos of the theater online, so you can already take the space in. Then having clearer signage, so you know exactly which way to go, to, for example, go to the bathroom or into the theater hall. Then getting help. For example, having a chat on the website of the theater, where you can beforehand inform the theater about your visit, and asking them, for example, can you help me with putting up my jacket, because it's a very crowded space there. Then having a quiet place in the theater to sit down before, in between, and after the performance to wind down. And the option to enter the theater hall earlier and exit a bit later to avoid the crowdedness. And then lastly, getting a seat at the pathway. So if you want to leave or you have to leave, you can always leave without having to cross other people. So how will I step in as a social innovator? Well, first by testing all these changes that I just mentioned. Just testing them and then asking for feedback from autistic people. So this will be a process of testing and feedback until we find the right solutions. And then I want to develop a guide for theaters in the Netherlands on how they can, step by step, improve the theater experience for autistic people. So hopefully they can enjoy it more in the future. So all these changes I just mentioned are very small changes, easy to apply if you ask me. So why don't we, if it helps so many people? Let's give autistic people a head start instead of dropping them in the middle of the race. So the visit will be a lot easier.